I've heard social scientists, anthropologists saying that I kept so many families under observation, you see. In my case, the opposite was true. The headman had kept me under observation throughout, you see. Within a couple of hours of my leaving my...
300 families were keeping you under observation.
He knew what had happened, whom I had met roughly. And then earlier, before I settled down in the village, I had been told that this village had no factions. It was, and so on, all this stuff. Actually, I was, I thought for a while whether I should go to such an atypical village if there were no factions. It would not be worth studying, you see. But very soon, within a few hours of my arrival, I knew there were factions. And one of the young faction leaders, he called himself a member of the Indian National Congress Party. He was one of the young Turks. He told me, you are staying near the headman, and doubtless he will tell you about what's going on in the village. It will be a very one-sided view of the village. If you are going to write a dispassionate account about our village, how do you make sure you will listen to everybody? I told him I would like to talk to you very much. This is exactly what I come to this village for. When are you free? I would like an appointment with you. I think this disarmed him a bit, and he became a kind of friend of mine. But more subtler than this was the fact that Nadugowda's sons were opposed to the headman and his rule, and they were leaders in a faction opposed to the headman. And they were some of my best informants and friends. And I used to go to them and I used to relax with them. The headman and his family were always, they were reserved. Whereas with this group, they were not so reserved. And I used to drink tea with them, go for long walks with them, and so on. And the headman was always suspicious of my association with them. And he would question me on what we talked about, and so on. I would tell him not the strict truth, you see, but something, we were talking about ritual and this and that. But once I really fell foul of the headman, and it was due entirely to my thoughtlessness. This was years after I had left the village. I was on a brief visit, and I think the normal caution which I exercised had left me. And one group of brothers were bitterly opposed to the headman. They said, the moment they saw me get off the bus, they said, will you come and photograph a part of the embankment of the village tank? It's very important to us, you see. I thought it was an innocent question. I went and took photographs, and they told me that there was the tank water had gushed through a hole and ruined their crop and so on. And they asked me to send photographs of the breach in the embankment, etc., which I promised to do. And then I went to pay my respects to the headman. The headman said, what have you been doing? He was very curt with me. What have you been doing? I said, I went to the tank and I've been photographed the embankment. And he said, do you know they are having a case against us? They have sued the panchayat for nuisance or something, and they are going to use you and your photographs as evidence against us. Do you think it's loyal on your part to do this to us, you see? It was comeuppance of the kind I had never thought would happen. And I at once apologized to him, and I told him that I would tear up the negatives, which I did. And so you have to be very, very careful in walking the the edge of factionalism, as it were. It's a very real danger, you see. But on the other hand, the headman didn't mind or couldn't prevent me from being very friendly with the untouchables. There was one young rebel among the untouchables who was very witty, very articulate, and he used to give it to the landowners or rather his landowner in a particular dispute I witnessed. I mean, he scored so many points that many landowners started admiring his his wit, his logic, and so on. This is another feature of Indian village life, that there is a certain aesthetic appreciation of disputes and arguments, and and the man who argues cleverly is admired, and so on. So he didn't mind my going to different castes, but he certainly minded me going to the opposite faction.
So they received sort of warnings about problems for Western anthropologists. Moving upwards or downwards is really not the thing. It's a question of moving sideways where the real problem lies. Would you say?
I would say both ways. This is why one has to be continually, on the watch about how one behaves. One is supposed to be relaxing, but even one is relaxing with friends. One should be careful about what one says, you see. At any moment you might hurt somebody, you see. It's really, there's no book which can help. I think it's some kind of increased sensitivity. I think this is why I found this, and the amount of data I had to collect and record. About once in between 4 to 6 weeks, I would have difficulties in sleeping. I would then go back to Mysore, probably sleep for a day or so, and then come back to see refreshed. It is very, I don't know, Jack, what's your experience? I think one has to be on the alert all the time, and this part of this train of field work, I would say.
Yes, it's true. Though I prefer it myself to other sorts of strains, such as I regard it as a pleasure.
Oh yeah.
to unfrequently indulge in.
Could I ask about another aspect of this being on your guard? It's again to do with the ethics of field work. There are two problems which I wondered whether you could comment on. One is, in the past, in a lot of the anthropology that was written by colonialists who went out to a place, they came back and they wrote about the natives, never expecting either to see the natives again, or certainly not expecting the natives to read their books. I wondered whether your situation, where you were very close in many ways to the people, and they were quite likely to be affected by what you wrote, and to read possibly what you wrote. You mentioned this Coorg return, whether that affects much more how you report, because so much more has to be carefully weighed in terms of what effect it might have on the people. And the second question is that, and this is what is often seen as the central ethical question in anthropology, the manipulation of people as a source of data. In other words, I find even now, 10 years after having done fieldwork in Nepal, when people from the field write to me, I get a peculiar sense of guilt, almost, that these are people who provided me with material for my own work. Often they write with requests which I'm unable to fulfill, or don't feel I can fulfill well enough. But I'm a long way away, I'm thousands of miles away. I wondered whether the problem of both having people as friends and people who you enter into human relationships with, and also as people who are ultimately objects of study, is one which is greater for you.
In a sense, it imposed a terrible strain on me, because to regard Nadagowda or Kullegowda or the headman as only sources of data was aberrant to me, because they were human beings and I had close and intimate links with them, as with my friends. But my role was that of the learner, and I could ask them questions, and they liked teaching me. That's also another thing. But there is a seamy side to data. It was when asking about that I felt most uncomfortable, you see. For instance, a dispute would have taken place.
Seamy side.
Seamy side.
Yes, yes.
For instance, who is sleeping with who, you see. Or did that man say that statement, make that statement because he had been spurned by that wife or widow, you see. I mean, this I found very unpleasant to ask. I would ask occasionally Kullegowda, you see. And he showed a reluctance to answer it. I mean, because in asking this question, I had somehow come down in his eyes, as it were, because he had the image of me as a scholar, as a decent human being, and to ask this question was a strain on me, and for him to answer itself was, was a strain. But sometimes he answered, sometimes he didn't. But then one problem, particularly when you are discussing intercaste relations, and as anyone who knows an Indian village, you hear stories about so and so being the keep of so and so and so on. These stories are abundant, and either you say that such rumors are widespread, or if you want to find out if it is really true, how do you do it? You see, I found asking these questions very unpleasant, and the only occasion I could ask such questions was from one of my friends when I was out on a walk with him, and then after we had talked about other things, to slowly turn the conversation around to this, I found so the collection of information was unpleasant for me, and to this extent I may have failed as a field worker. You see, that is one. And the second, I did find that my being friends with them minimized the manipulative element in my field work. And I would do errands, I would run errands for them, I'd give them gifts whenever I went to Mysore. I knew one of the things the village lacked was fresh vegetables and fruits. I would take fresh vegetables and fruits and distribute it among my friends. So, continually I would have this problem of how do I repay them? Am I doing the right thing? And I did try to help, but ultimately the question is that there is the question of manipulation. I mean, there's a fact of manipulation by the anthropologists of the indigenes, and it's a very unpleasant affair, and it is unpleasant for me particularly because I feel I am very close to them. You see, I have some ideas for atoning for my sins, but that will have to be done in the future.
Marcus, were you going to ask about the ethics of fieldwork? Or,
I was thinking more about the distancing effect, as it were. You were talking earlier with Stephen about sending out students into their own backyards, as it were, but you still make it apparent that they've got to go to a different culture area or language area. And you were saying that yourself, you went back to Mysore to sort of recuperate and sleep. Does anybody in India actually work literally with their own culture? Do you think that's possible or even desirable?
I think it is necessary at some point to look at your own culture. Because the anthropology can't always be of the other culture, you see. But to do your own culture calls for certain habits of mind and thought. This distancing of looking at your culture as as an outsider, I think has to be done. You see, I have in a talk I gave, which was published selectively. It's distributed among a few people. I discussed the development of the field worker in the field. The first stage was bewilderment, once-bornness, I called it. And second stage, this great rapport which you think you have, I call twice-bornness, so much so that you look at the world from the point of view of the indigenes, and you think everything they do is right, and everything the outsider, the official, the visitor, or even you do is wrong, you see. But I think twice-bornness is not enough. It may be enough for a Brahmin, it's not enough for an anthropologist. He has to be thrice-born, and he has to go back and distance himself from the field. And one process, two necessary acts in distancing. One is to run away from the field, you see. Physical distancing is absolutely necessary. You must get away from that environment. And two, writing is distancing, you see. So the discipline of writing, and writing for an audience of anthropologists, each of whom has his own group and has done or is about to do the distancing. I think these two are necessary. And after you have done probably one or two people, studies of one or two people, then you can take on your own culture, not before that, you see.
So you feel that fieldwork is, I mean, Peter Berger, for instance, has his idea of disillusioning, that as a sociologist you finally come to see your own society from outside, but he doesn't feel it's necessary to go off to New Guinea or somewhere before you can do that. So you would regard it as essential to leave your own culture before?
Not to go to New Guinea, you see. For instance, let me say, let me take up an area where I know nothing about and say, I think a middle class student here could study a slum here. If you wanted to go to New Guinea, you can go to Leicester and study the Gujaratis, you see. That would be a different kind of culture. So then he can go back and study his own people.
In fact, I'm going up to Leicester to study.
You are going up to Leicester. Doing the right thing.
Yes. I'm glad you said that way.
Well, Srinivas, do you find that if you're seeking explanation from your villages, you get different explanation from different people? And does that mean that you had to kind of work out the psychology of each informer before you can evaluate what exactly are they saying?
Not only psychology, you have to know his interests, his occupation, his land rights, his relations with his kinsfolk, his friends. Each statement comes from a particular personality and a whole matrix of context. So the explanation itself needs a comment and an explanation. Am I making sense? Or?
Yes, but like you mentioned about the fact that village headman said that there were no factions. Are there events which after a period they begin to deny that these happened and gloss over things so that it's presented in a very different way by the same people over time?
I think there are two or three things here. One, any outsider, when they are faced with any outsider, especially with an outsider whom they respect, the standard rhetoric is we have no factions. Because anything which does not create a positive image in your mind about the village, they would not tell you. In fact, within 2 days of my coming, I knew that somebody had set fire to somebody's hayrick. And the matter was mentioned in my presence, but when I tried to ask details about it, I was just, they just turned to some other topic. It was weeks later that I started coming to know about who had set fire to whose hayrick and so on. And so the point is, gradually as you are absorbed into the village, then you are told more and more things. But even then, in the last analysis, they remember that you are an outsider. And they won't tell everything to you. Because of my many contacts and my friends amongst the younger villagers, and I think in a sense they meant it. I think there was a compliment implied in this. They said, as I was leaving the village, they said, you know so much about our village, you can get every one of us into trouble, you see. So there is that fear also. On the one hand, they want to present a decent image of their village to you. On the other hand, if you know too much, then you can get them into trouble. For instance, there was not a single landowner who had not encroached on government land, you see. And I had land figures, I knew the survey numbers of each villager. I could say, where exactly they could have encroached upon. But they didn't know one thing. Even if I made a report about it, the government officials would know that this was universal and it was silly on their part to try and prevent this, you see. They would have that much sense, you see. I gather.
I wonder if I could take away from the problems of fieldwork, because get a group of anthropologists together and they always want to ask, really they're asking about their own experience rather than yours. I wondered if I could ask you what it was that led you into doing sociology in the first place, when you said you went to work with Gurye in in Bombay?
At a purely secular rational level, I would say accident. By this I mean I was lucky enough to have malaria around the time I passed the matriculation exam, and I was thought to be very delicate by my family, and they said this boy is not tough enough to do medicine, so let him go to the arts. That was one, you see.
Yes.
And second, after I passed my intermediate examination, and and I didn't do very well in it for various reasons, my brother asked a friend of his, now look, what should Chamu do for the BA? That friend was a Marxist and an oddball, and he used to recite revolutionary Marxist songs on about Sacco and Vanzetti. They were.
I recall the name.
Yeah. And he was a friend of my brother's. My brother had friends in all places, and he asked me to produce the handbook of the University of Mysore, and he went through the BA Honours courses. There was social philosophy, and it was an encyclopedic course designed by Anil Seal's grandfather, I suspect, or he had a hand in it. It included, apart from English and the second language, Kannada, Sanskrit, it included in the minor subjects social psychology, social anthropology, comparative political institutions, and economics or something, comparative economics or something. And then as major subjects, philosophy of religion, political philosophy, ethics, history of ethics and political philosophy, Indian social institutions, Indian ethics, and essay or something, So my Acharya, that was my brother's friend, said, this is a very humanizing course, why don't you make him go through it? And my brother said, why don't you take it, you see, remembering that I was too delicate to do medicine, So I went on to social philosophy. There I, got really some kind of background, I won't say grounding. And it was there that I heard about Ghurye and his eminence. And it was in my first or second year on the honours course that the names of Rivers, Malinowski and so on became familiar to me. And then I went to Ghurye. Ghurye was our examiner at the final year honours, and he had given me first class marks. And when I went to Ghurye, normally you were not allowed to do a master's degree in sociology in Bombay without taking 8 papers over a period of 2 years. He said, you have covered the ground, so why don't you do some why don't you do it by dissertation? And this was due to the fact that Ghurye didn't want me to waste my time, and also because he sensed that I had read too much theory and highfalutin things, and that I should be rooted in facts. And you know what he did? The first book he gave me to read was Hobhous's Models in Evolution, which very nearly put me off sociology. Have you seen that book?
Yes, I...
Don't tell me you prescribe it.
Yeah. I find other ways of boring the students.
Going back to those early times, you were doing your graduate work during a momentous period of Indian history, the gaining of independence. So, was anthropology associated with the British Raj in any way? Was that a factor at all?
Yeah, anthropology was, and the Indian nationalists were, members of the Indian National Congress were opposed to, ICS officials turned anthropologists. And at that time they were saying that, arguing for a separate status for tribals, the need for tribals to be protected from the Plains Hindus. And in the 1935 Act, there were 2 categories, one the scheduled castes, that is the untouchables, and the other the scheduled areas. And these areas were areas where the tribals lived. You will be surprised to learn that about 18 miles from Bombay is Thana, where tribals live, the Warlis and others. That was excluded from the limited provincial autonomy offered under the 1935 Government of India Act. So Indian nationalists were opposed to anthropology. But, Gurye himself...
They were opposed to setting aside these areas
Yes,
because they wanted it done on a
they thought it was a
regional
ruse
basis.
of
Yes,
the
yes.
rulers
To divide,
to divide and to keep the tribals to themselves. Gurye wrote a book based entirely on secondary sources on the scheduled tribes and their future. It showed that the problems of the tribals in many ways were similar to those of the poorer peasants, and it didn't make sense to separate them. So that way he won acceptance at the hands of the Indian nationalists. Gurye didn't do it for a dishonest reason. I mean, Gurye would not do anything dishonest like that. He was really convinced that there was so much of tribal culture which was in common with the culture of the so-called lower groups and vice versa, that it was artificial to separate it, you see. And then there was Vaikunt Mehta, not Vaikunt Mehta, no, another person, Thakar Bapa, whom Elvin also mentions, who had dedicated his life to working among the tribals. So, there were both the nationalist approach to the tribal problem and the British approach to the tribal problem. So, there was this conflict between the two. And that conflict, in a sense, still continues, you see.
So when you came back to set up your first department, was there with a...
No, by that time things had changed. My job was to sell the idea of field work. And field work not in the sense of hit and run trips, you see, but really intensive field work. And I think, I laid about it with a will, as they say. I made a lot of enemies. I was not discreet. I wrote polemical pieces criticizing armchair anthropology. Generally made a nuisance of myself. But I think it paid off in the end. And now, I mean, when I'm in a group in India, I take up the position that sociology is a field science. And I do it deliberately because knowing the habits of the Indian middle classes, I want to stress the need for them to go out and live with the, with all kinds of groups.
Do you think it's a feature that's confined to the English middle classes in any way, Shamo? And you find them all around that don't know anything about the productive processes or anything like that. But tell me, would you say something about your going back? You went to Rampur in 47.
48.
48.
January.
48 to 49. And you came back to Oxford.
January 14th or 15th.
49.
49.
And you stayed in Oxford then for?
Till 51 June when I got the chair in Baroda.
Yes. And then, yes.
I stayed in Baroda till...
Then you gave up the post and your successor was Louis Dumont. I had to get that in.
And then David Pocock.
Yes. Well, and you went from Oxford to Baroda. And how long were you there, started working with the Institute?
You see, 8 years in Baroda. It's a story of my life, if I may say so. I stayed long enough in Baroda to get a few good teachers and to get a few good students. Arvind Shah and Narayan Sheth were both my students there. And both of them have chairs now. And then the University Grants Commission, which was set up in 54 or 55, 53 or 54 or 55, I'm hazy, I'm not certain about the date. They thought so highly of the department in Baroda. Suddenly, things were happening in Baroda. They gave me money for new posts, scholarships for study, including at the PhD level, and then grants for a library, for enlarging the library, and also money for fieldwork, etc., and money for a new building. But then, 1959, February, I was in Delhi because Dr. Rao invited me to the Delhi chair. And so, just when I could have settled down and really, started doing my own work, I had to move to Delhi, where again the same situation. I had to start a new department. And Andre was one of my first students in and first recruitments in Delhi. And in 9 years, the Delhi department, became so well known that we were made a center of advanced study for the teaching of sociology, and we then had 4 professors in the department, and the number of posts was increased. We got money for a new building, we got money for research, etc., and also money to attract students from all over India. But then in 72 I had to leave to start a new institute in Bangalore, and I spent 6 years, and then I gave it up because I felt I was becoming increasingly alienated from my studies. And now I have a Homi Bhabha Senior Fellowship, and I have an honorary fellowship at the Indian Institute of Management, and facilities to do my own work, and I'm slowly catching up with material, and a tremendous amount of new work has been done in India, exciting work, and I hope during the next few years I will catch up with it and be back in business, as it were. You see, too much of my time has been spent in teaching and in promoting the discipline, both in the university, inside university and outside. You see, so much so I don't want to look at a student now.
I noticed you looking the other way. But the institute you set up at Broda and the school and to Delhi, were they both combined anthropology, sociology departments?
Actually, in Delhi there was unfortunately already an anthropology department. I couldn't do anything about it. So, but I had friendly relations with them.
So you became professor of sociology?
Sociology.
Yeah.
But it did not prevent me from doing what I liked. For instance, in 1968 or so, the University Grants Commission requested me to start a program for the tribal people of northeastern hill region. That is to say, the Khasis, the Garos, the Panar, and then Arunachal. So we are getting students from those regions, and you are now getting members of these tribes becoming sociologists and occupying positions, teaching and other positions in their own areas. So this is one of the best things that happened, I think. And by and large, if you join the Delhi University Sociology Department, you can study a tribe, a temple town, an urban slum, a factory, anything, So, and then the tribute to the department was paid by some members of the anthropology department who send their sons or daughters to study sociology in the Department of Sociology, you see.
And that is, so it's partly for that reason that your students, many of them, have gone into a wide range of fields. You've worked on trades unions and a whole range of activities of that kind.
The one who worked on trade unions has just been appointed to a chair in industrial relations in the Management Institute at Hyderabad, and I take it, vain that I am, I take it as a feather in my cap. But let me stress about one aspect of my work. I am not, I always feel mixed about that is, it is not easy to develop. I mean, not that India didn't have a tradition of work in sociology and anthropology, but I had a specific conception of sociology and anthropology, social anthropology, and I had to promote this, and promoting it in a developing country. Luckily for me, the University Grants Commission came, and the ICSSR, the Indian Council of Social Science Research, came, and it made it easier for me to do what I could for the disciplines. But in the process, I feel my own work and research and reading have suffered grievously. Sometimes I feel that I shouldn't regret it. Sometimes I feel I should regret it. You see. So this is mixed up feeling. On the other hand, I'm quite certain that had I continued in Oxford, I might have become a much better scholar. But on the other hand, I wouldn't have the satisfactions that, such as they are, which are mine today in seeing that anybody from Cambridge or Oxford or Harvard or Yale or Chicago can go to Delhi and have a thumping good discussion on any sociological or anthropological issue. That way, I feel my work has been rewarded, but I have regrets on the personal side. I don't know if I'm making sense to you.
As a student, I can see there be no regrets from the students. We're very glad you stayed on.
But now that you've reorganized in your life in this way and have started reading all these books and so on, perhaps you'll send a few students to come and study not with us in Cambridge, but perhaps study us in Cambridge.
Both, exactly.
Both.
Hopefully.
Perhaps we ought to call it a day. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much indeed.
Yeah.
May I divest my...
Yes,
my
you
sacred
can
thread?
take the...